My coworker lied to the boss. Huge mistake. Most bad coworkers make one mistake. They get lazy. According to one hotel employee, his coworker Eric had evolved beyond simple laziness. Eric had figured out something much better. He'd found a way to avoid work while still taking credit for it. For months, he managed to convince management that he was one of the most reliable employees on the night shift. The truth was very different, because while Eric spent his shifts looking busy, someone else was quietly making sure his mistakes never became visible. Then one day, Eric got greedy. Instead of just taking credit for shared work, he started blaming his coworker for problems that didn't exist. And according to the employee telling the story, that was the exact moment Eric accidentally destroyed the one thing keeping him from being exposed. According to the employee, he worked the night shift at a small hotel. There were only 2 employees working overnight, him and Eric. The arrangement sounded simple: 2 employees, 1 hotel, 1 shift. In reality, it created a problem, because with only 2 people working, it became very obvious who was actually doing the work. And who wasn't. According to the employee, Eric had mastered the art of looking productive. Not being productive. Looking productive. There was a difference. A huge difference. Eric always seemed busy when management walked through. He'd carry papers around, walk quickly through hallways, talk about tasks, talk about responsibilities, talk about everything he planned to do. The problem was that he rarely actually did any of it. Instead, he preferred letting somebody else handle the boring jobs. Coffee station cleaning, supply restocking, breakfast preparation, inventory checks, all the annoying tasks that nobody enjoyed. According to the employee, those jobs somehow always became his responsibility. Not officially, just conveniently, every shift. For months, at first he ignored it. After all, arguing over small tasks wasn't worth the headache. But over time, a pattern became obvious. Whenever management appeared, Eric suddenly became very involved, very visible, very helpful, and very eager to discuss how much work they had accomplished. The employee hated that word, they, because most of the time, there was no they. There was him, and then there was Eric, watching, talking, and somehow getting equal credit. Then there was breakfast prep, the task that eventually changed everything. According to hotel policy, night shift had to prepare breakfast supplies. One item was especially important: waffle batter. Every morning, the batter needed to be moved from the freezer. If it wasn't moved in time, it couldn't thaw properly, which meant breakfast problems. And breakfast problems meant complaints. Lots of complaints. Technically, both employees were responsible. Technically. In reality, only one person ever remembered: the employee. And according to him, the only reason Eric ever remembered was because of one thing: a reminder. Every shift, at exactly the same time, every night, without fail. The employee would remind Eric, and Eric would act like he'd already planned to do it, every single time. The employee didn't care who got credit, he just wanted breakfast prepared. Because Eric was about to make a career-ending mistake. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One morning, the manager arrived, and Eric was already talking. According to the employee, that was never a good sign, because Eric loved an audience, especially management. The employee wasn't paying much attention until he heard his own name. Then he started listening. Apparently, Eric was explaining how many mistakes got made on night shift. Specifically, his mistakes. Except Eric wasn't calling them his mistakes. He was blaming somebody else, the employee. According to Eric, he spent every shift cleaning up after him. According to Eric, he constantly caught forgotten tasks. According to Eric, the hotel would have fallen apart without him. The employee couldn't believe what he was hearing. Months of reminders, months of covering for him, months of making him look competent. And now Eric was using all of that to make himself look like the hero. The employee didn't argue, didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself. Instead, he made a decision. A very small decision, but one that would completely change Eric's life. He decided to stop reminding him. That's it. No confrontation, no revenge speech, no complaints, just silence. And according to the employee, Eric never even noticed. For the next few shifts, everything seemed normal. Eric kept doing what Eric always did, walking around, looking busy, talking about work. Instead of actually doing it, the employee simply watched and waited. Not because he was setting a trap, because he genuinely wanted to see what would happen. Eric was supposedly the guy who caught everyone's mistakes. According to Eric, he double-checked everything. According to Eric, nothing got past him. According to Eric, he was basically running the shift. So surely one missing reminder wouldn't matter, right? The first night passed. No reminder. The second night passed. Still no reminder. The third night passed, and according to the employee, Eric never noticed. Not once, not even a little. The employee found that fascinating, because it meant Eric wasn't actually checking anything. He wasn't double-checking, he wasn't supervising, he wasn't catching mistakes. He was simply relying on somebody else, the employee. And the moment that support disappeared, everything started falling apart. Then came breakfast, the breakfast that finally exposed everything. According to the employee, the morning attendant opened the freezer, then immediately stopped, because something was wrong, very wrong. The waffle batter was still frozen solid, exactly where it had been left. Nobody had moved it, nobody had prepared it, nobody had checked it, and now breakfast service was in trouble. The complaints started immediately. Guests wanted waffles. The hotel had promised waffles. The hotel did not have usable waffle batter, which naturally led to questions. Lots of questions. Management wanted answers. The breakfast attendant wanted answers. Everyone wanted answers. And according to the employee, Eric immediately knew who to blame. Or at least who he wanted to blame. The employee. Again. Eric quickly explained that he thought the employee handled that task, just like always. The employee wasn't even surprised. In Eric's mind, everything was somebody else's responsibility. Every mistake, every problem, every forgotten task. Then the manager said something. Something simple, something devastating. A single sentence, and according to the employee, the room instantly became silent. The manager looked directly at Eric, then asked, "I thought you said you always double-check behind him." Silence. Complete silence. According to the employee, Eric looked stunned. Not angry, not confused. Caught. For the first time, there was no excuse available. No explanation, no blame shifting, no convenient story. Because Eric had created this problem himself. A few days earlier, he had bragged about always catching mistakes. Now management was simply taking him at his word, and his own words had become evidence. The employee said the room stayed quiet for several seconds. Nobody needed to argue. Nobody needed to defend themselves. The truth had finally become obvious. Because if Eric truly checked everything, how had he missed the waffle batter? And if he didn't check everything, why had he claimed he did? The questions answered themselves, and according to the employee, management finally started paying closer attention. Very close attention. Suddenly, Eric's stories didn't sound so convincing. Suddenly, his excuses didn't work as well. Suddenly, people started noticing who actually completed the work. The employee, not Eric. The funniest part? The employee never reported him. Never complained, never argued, never exposed him directly. All he did was stop helping. And Eric exposed himself. Completely. And honestly, the most satisfying part wasn't the breakfast disaster. It wasn't management catching on. It wasn't the awkward silence. It was realizing how little effort it took. For months, the employee had been quietly making Eric look competent. One reminder, one sentence, every shift. That was all it took. And the moment that reminder disappeared, Eric's entire image collapsed. Not because anyone sabotaged him, not because anyone lied about him, not because anyone got revenge. Because, for the first time, he was forced to succeed on his own. And according to the employee, that turned out to be a much bigger problem than anyone expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't doing something. Sometimes it's simply stopping. Over the following weeks, management started paying attention, very close attention. And according to the employee, it was amazing how many problems suddenly appeared. Not new problems, old problems. Problems that had always existed. The difference was nobody was covering for Eric anymore. And that's when the employee finally understood something. Eric was never good at the job. He was good at taking credit for somebody else's work. The moment that somebody stopped helping, the entire illusion disappeared. And according to the employee, the funniest part was that he never exposed Eric. Eric exposed himself, all because one reminder stopped coming. In the end, what happened to Eric is something a lot of lazy coworkers never see coming. For months, he convinced himself that he was the one holding everything together. The problem was that he wasn't. Someone else was quietly making sure the important tasks got done. Someone else was catching the little things before they became big problems. Someone else was making sure the shift ran smoothly. And because everything kept working, Eric started believing his own story. That's the funny thing about people who take credit for other people's work. Eventually, they forget who's actually doing it. They become so comfortable standing in the spotlight that they stop noticing who's holding the flashlight. The employee never needed a big revenge plan. He never needed an argument. He never needed to complain to management. All he did was stop covering for someone who didn't appreciate it. And once that happened, the truth came out all by itself. No drama, no shouting, no grand confrontation. Just one missed task and one very awkward question from a manager. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it arrives 3 shifts later in the form of frozen waffle batter. But what do you think? Have you ever worked with someone who took credit for other people's work? Or maybe you've had a coworker who somehow managed to avoid every responsibility while everyone else picked up the slack. Let me know your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoy workplace drama, petty revenge, entitled coworkers, and satisfying karma stories, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.